Hello, and welcome to Required Reading, the podcast that revisits the most impactful books from our childhood. I'm your host, Erin Bowles. I am a writer, actor, and comedian. Our guest today is Molly McGlynn. Molly is a Canadian writer and director living in LA. She's directed numerous television shows, including Working Moms, The Wonder Years, Grace and Frankie, The Big Door Prize, Bless This Mess, and Welcome to Flatch, which is where we met. Her first feature film, Mary Goes Round, starring Aya Cash, premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2017 and is screened at dozens of film festivals, winning multiple awards. Her second feature film, Fitting In, formerly known as Bloody Hell, is a semi autobiographical coming of age dramedy inspired by her own experiences, having been born with MRKH syndrome, starring Maddie Ziegler. The film had its world premiere at South by Southwest, won Best Canadian Film at the Vancouver International Festival, was nominated for a GLAAD Award, and was theatrically released in February of 2024. She is currently finishing post-production on the forthcoming Acorn AMC limited series Irish Blood, starring Alicia Silverstone, of which she directed all episodes. She is also the host of the podcast Hello, My Mom is Dead. Hello.
Hello. Hi. I love being on someone else's podcast and not talking about dead moms.
Always welcome.
Thank you. It's always the worst sitting through your own bio. I
That's okay.
disassociated for the amount of time you read that.
Your episodes of Welcome to Flatch have some of the moments I'm most proud of at the end of season one. Those are some really wonderful episodes.
Oh, good. It was such a highlight working with you. You are so naturally gifted and funny and just your comedic timing, and you were just so easy to work with.
Thank you so much. I really
Yeah.
needed that.
Gosh, we all do.
Well, our book today, first poetry collection on the podcast from 1974, Shel Silverstein's Where the Sidewalk Ends. What's your story with this book?
It's funny. I was looking at your list of available books, and the past few months have been a bit of a shit show for me, and I really wanted to do it, but I was like, okay, I gotta pick something like pretty quick read here. And so I was like, okay, this is perfect. But then it also is so representative of my childhood and the types of books I was read. And it's like so ingrained in my experience of childhood, it's hard to pinpoint the exact moment. I was for sure read this book by my parents, and it was kind of a mainstay in the library at school. And I think it really just captured my imagination and scared me at times and confused me. So it's really been interesting reading it as an adult. And I'm like, oh, these are poems that a parent or an adult would get entertainment of reading as well. But I also think that so much of what I remember being read this book and reading this book is his illustrations that
Mhm.
are very kind of minimalist and absurd and creepy and funny and a bit grotesque sometimes. So it's as much the words as it is the illustration.
Definitely. I want to give just a little bit of background, and we touched on this right before we started recording. It's 1974, so it's the year Nixon resigns. ABBA wins Eurovision with their song Waterloo. Huge. Um,
Huge.
and then Shel Silverstein has an absolutely wild life. He starts going, I think, to an arts college, is drafted, serves in Japan and Korea, and then does everything. He has 2 Grammy Awards and an Oscar nomination, all for composing. He wrote A Boy Named Sue, Johnny Cash's song, worked with Loretta Lynn, Chris Christopherson, and was one of the leading cartoonists for Playboy, writing these like travel journals. He co-wrote a film with David Mamet, wrote over 100 one-act plays. I mean, you said you did some research too. This is an insane
Yeah, I
person.
kind of went down the rabbit hole of Shel Silverstein. And I remember like vaguely a few years ago sort of hearing kerfuffle of like he's bad or like these books are bad or something.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh no, is he like a pedophile? Like,
Yeah.
relieved that he was not. I think some of the pushback on him has to do primarily with his start at Playboy,
Mhm.
and his work as an adult illustrator and writer. Very like unsurprisingly puritanical response to him, I would say. And I listened again to A Boy Named Sue when I
Mhm.
found out that fact and was reading the lyrics. I mean, just a wild song. First of
Yeah.
all, the lyrics, it makes so much sense that he also wrote that song. Just the cadence of some of these poems totally lend themselves to music. Like that's why they're fun to read them. That's why they are delightful as a child to be read them because they have a lyricism and a wordplay with them. Yeah, A Boy Named Sue is wild. It's like this guy whose dad named him Sue and then left, and he goes on a vendetta and recognizes his scar at a bar and then like wants to kill him. And then his dad sort of acknowledges what he did and then all is forgiven. It's wild, but like it is just kind of like a darker version of these poems.
Absolutely. And it's silly that I like didn't make that connection of how similar it is, but absolutely. And I think this book, like, you can't, obviously you can, but the experience of this book is enriched so much by listening to it and reading it out loud. It's just like cut down so much just by reading it on the page. And it's just so delightful to work through those words.
Yeah.
And I love songs that take you for a journey and have a story, and I think that's such a delightful one.
There's a cheekiness to the character.
Yes.
And I think I also read that it was banned in
Yes.
several American schools in the 80s, which, given our climate now, I'm like, oh, I don't doubt that this could be banned again. I mean, I was like writing notes about sort of topics. I mean, I wrote like vegetarianism. We're talking about God. We're talking about eating babies. We're talking about spitting as a hobby, sort of adult ennui and, feeling lost as an adult. There's a poem named called Just Me that I wrote polyamory. Because I'll just read it. It says, Sweet
Of
Marie,
course.
she loves just me. She also loves Maurice McGee. No, she don't.
Yes.
She loves just me. She also loves Louise Dupree. No, she don't. She loves just me. She also loves the willow tree. No, she don't. She loves just me. Poor, poor fool. Why can't you see? She can love others and still love thee. Like, it's just
Yeah. Oh, I forgot
about a boy learning
this.
about polyamory and I guess not owning this girl's love.
Yeah. And also just a really sweet thing of like loving one person doesn't diminish loving another. That's
For
such a
sure. And she also loves a tree too. It's like
yes.
she's got other things in her life besides these guys. So back to the like being banned. I mean, what I think I responded to as a kid about these poems is that he gives children credit in terms
Yeah.
of limits of their imagination, mental agility, and play that I think is really unique. He leans into the delight of childhood in a way that is really beautiful and pure, but I could see in a kind of restrictive, puritanical sense how people are like, this is not good for kids.
Yeah.
Another one I like, so I was born in the 80s and like growing up in the 90s, it was very much like, you are so special. You can be everything you want in the world. And, one of his poems is called The Little Blue Engine, where
Yeah.
he,
Oh my gosh. I love
yeah,
that
like,
one.
you love that one?
I love that one. Yeah.
I wrote it's anti-toxic positivity, and it's like
Yes.
about this engine who thinks he can, and then he crashes, and then it resolves with if the track is tough and the hill is rough, thinking you can just ain't enough. And I'm like, ain't that the facts?
Yep.
And like that's what children need to hear. And I feel like so much of children's literature is sort of like it just sets up an expectation for the world that isn't there. And like the other thing, I mentioned feeling like a little spooked or scared as a kid
Yeah.
sometimes. And like, but that's okay. Like it just really like leans into the full range of experience as a child. And it's like, okay, should we not read kids things that might spook them?
Yeah. And I think a lot of the books we've done on the podcast stick with people because they have that real aspect, even if it's fantastic, of real fear. And I also think it allows you to experience fear in like a safe environment that then you can go and understand things more in a more true light. But I was reading in discussions of the bans, I saw a critic, like a literary critic, say that these bans kind of assume that kids take everything literally and that
Yeah.
and like you said they don't give kids credit for being able to understand jokes and things like that, but also death is a thing that happens and
Mhm.
things are scary and that those are not just acceptable but inevitable. So how do we work through them and how do we have a little laugh with them?
Yeah, and like thinking about why or how it may have impacted me. Like I really, in my own work as a writer and director now, I try to balance darkness with levity. Like that
Yeah.
tightrope is kind of always where I want to be. And I feel like that's what he has, because on the surface, they're very like playful, sing-songy, just entertaining pieces, but when you unpack them, there is a darkness under them, and I love that.
Yeah, and there's a real like casual and conversational tone that I think makes it and there's like a meta aspect where he is talking to you directly. There's understanding that it is just a book and there's playing with form. And
Yeah.
there my favorite, I want to ask maybe like what your favorite poem is or
Mm.
the ones that you remembered the most. But I want to start just with the very first poem, which is called Invitation. And the illustration is a little tiny lit candle. And I'll read it because it's like 6 lines. If you are a dreamer, come in. If you are a dreamer, a wisher, a liar, a hoper, a prayer, a magic bean buyer, if you are a pretender, come sit by my fire, for we have some flax golden tales to spin. Come in, come in. I feel like
I
that's
love that.
everything. Yeah.
You can like picture little kids on a mat being read to, like leaning in. And
Yeah.
it creates this tone of you're entering this magical world that I love. And like my parents were Irish, but like some of the stuff that they read to me, it was Shel Silverstein, it was Roald Dahl, it was C.S. Lewis. Like there was kind of this dark but intriguing other world
Mhm.
that really made my imagination go wild. But yeah, that's such a beautiful way to start it. And with that candle
Yeah.
illustration as well, like it's, a secretive atmosphere.
Yeah, and I think something that is really wonderful is the use of negative space, like the
Mm,
drip sparse, they're without color. Apparently, Silverstein was like very, very particular sometimes about even like the paper that books are
yeah.
printed on. And so I think the minimalism, like you said, allows the imagination to fill those in. I was almost thinking like if you have a really cool parent, they might let you like color things in.
Hmm.
That would be so delightful.
Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned the paper because when I was reading it, the pages are so thick that thought I was skipping or like clumping together pages. And then reading about how particular he was about the paper quality and stock made so much sense. But there is that play between the weight of the physical paper and
Mhm.
then the minimalism of what's on the page, which is so interesting.
I wanted to ask what your sort of like dynamic is with poetry, because it's something I've never really delved into.
I think I have like a pretty not a like this sounds so pretentious. I have a deep relationship with poetry.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
Again, like the lullabies I was sung to as a child were Irish lullabies my mom had of like places and words I couldn't really understand. So there was a poetry in those. Like when Irish people have parties, it's like every Irish kid sort of dreaded thing. Basically, what happens is your parents have a party, they get tipsy, and then they see whatever kids are around and they say, do your party piece. And you're like, oh no. And you're like hiding, you're just trying to get a snack in the kitchen. And it's like a poem, a song, a whatever. So there was a lot of that going on. Then I think as a kid, I started writing in high school. I wrote some horrific melodramatic poems, but I thought that it was a way to express myself. Was it good?
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. My mom was a writer. She wrote beautiful poetry. I think if she was not a mother to five children, she likely would have been a published writer. She died when I was 21, so she didn't really have that opportunity to explore that career path. But no, I would just say, like, culturally, the environment I was raised in put a big emphasis on poetry, music, storytelling. So I feel like Shel Silverstein was very much in the realm of what I was exposed to.
I love this. I feel like sort of oral storytelling has kind of fallen out a little bit, or at least just isn't as present. And I think you mentioned it with the very first poem of I love that. I'm thinking a lot about summer camp also, just in my
Mm.
own mind, but that pulling together in a circle in the darkness to tell a story and create and imagine. It's so exciting, but also bonding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, like, I went to Catholic school until I was 13, and there was a creepiness about that, like, and the ritual around it, and the candles and the incense and the confession and the all of that. So because I was in that environment, which to me inherently always has this looming fear over it, like Catholicism and how I was raised, I think, look, there are some beautiful things that I was taught in that education which should go for everybody, which are, treat thy neighbor as you would thyself, all that sort of stuff. But there was this nebulous sky daddy who is watching. Therefore, as a child, you have to go talk to a man in a wooden box and tell him what you did that's wrong. So that darkness was all around me. So this wasn't that much of a leap. Like, some of the darker elements of it I was familiar
Yeah.
with.
And it's nice to have that reflected back. It's not just me feeling this.
Exactly. Exactly. Like, as a kid, the world is mysterious and silly and absurd, and there can be some humor about it, about what we don't know, and the
Yeah.
absurdity of adults. And so much of what he's saying is about children leaning into their childlike qualities. And he
Mhm.
sort of mentions any sort of sadder notes are about adults and their loss of that, especially in Catholic school, where it's like, behave like this, don't do that. So many rules. It's Lent, don't eat meat, you can't drink the blood of Christ before it's blood. Like, all those
Mm.
restrictions were around. So it's like, no, this was being like, go try it out.
Oh.
Go into the room that they said don't go into.
Oh, I love that. There's one poem about this young girl, Melinda May, who
Mm.
says she's going to eat a whale and it takes her 89 years, but she eats that whole whale. And I was like, God, I was so stubborn when I was young. And it's probably good that I'm not that stubborn, but I love
Yeah.
her. Like, there's a little, I love that. I love what you said about leaning into that. Yeah.
And the illustration on that, like, I think that's over 2 pages, and the
Yeah.
first one is like her as a little girl trying to eat the whale, and the next page is this like crazed older woman who's also wildly proud of herself and has like whale juice dripping down her mouth. Like, it's
There's a whole like whale rib cage
yeah,
on the table. It's wonderful.
yeah,
And I feel like something that this book does is like with the Little Blue Engine, it takes things that you are already familiar with and
yeah.
has a little fun with them and a little spin on it. And like you
Hmm.
said, it's acknowledging the absurdity in life. I think there's several poems where he says, like, we're gonna go to the crazy world where the wind smells like peppermint. Because why wouldn't we? Like, we want to stay in a
Hmm.
world where the smoke is gray and black. I love that imagination.
Yeah, and it's like thinking about who he was. Like, he seemed to be like a real Renaissance man
Mhm.
who, I mean, I'm reading between the lines and a
Yeah.
lot of his biographical information, but could not easily be pinned down to one identity, one job, one skill set. And, like, maybe a lot of this can be read about his own journey to not abandoning the child within in a world that's telling you to be this, that, and the other. I mean, like, he served in the military, like a
Yeah.
very, I'm sure, traumatizing, regimented experience,
Yeah.
and then becoming an artist. I can't remember if he was married to the women he had children with, but he
Mm.
was a father himself. And I found myself thinking about that a lot. And I looked it up. I think this book was 74, and then I think it was 75, but a woman he had met at the Playboy Mansion.
Yeah.
I wrote her name down, Susan Taylor. Apparently, she died a day before their daughter Shoshana's fifth birthday.
Yeah.
And then she went to live with an uncle, which I find an interesting fact,
Yes.
which I didn't find much information about. However, she went to live with an uncle, and then Shoshana died of a brain aneurysm when she was
Yeah.
11. So obviously that was extremely tragic. And then he had another child with another woman. He had a son who I think is around my age, and I actually looked him up. I was like, what's he up to? And I think he's like a singer-songwriter. But I'm like, wow, wild. Like, and his website mentioned something about like after the death of his father, Shel Silverstein. It's like, wow, imagine
Oh.
that is Shel Silverstein. And like, look, I have no business commenting on what kind of parent he was. I don't know. I think subsequent work had been dedicated to
Yeah.
the daughter he lost, and but I did find it an interesting detail that she went to live with a family member.
Me too, instead of him. That also really stuck with me. I think the book that is all about her death is called A Light in the Dark. But yeah, I think he had a very nomadic existence. You messaged me right before this. His houseboat is for sale, and he
Yeah.
lived in that thing forever and just kind of, yeah, I think definitely didn't want to be tied down. And it just is interesting that he writes not exclusively for children, but does write a lot for children, and yet doesn't raise her. It's very,
Yeah.
and you know so little about it, but it's really just such an interesting detail.
Yeah, if anyone has tea on like Shell's relationship with his living child or his
Yeah,
daughter, please let us know.
yeah, right in.
And like, yeah, I think this book is dedicated to, it says for Ursula on the balloon.
Mhm.
And then I looked her up. She was his editor. And
Yeah,
like reading about that relationship, I think he attributes so much of her to getting him to write in the children's space, which was not something he naturally veered into.
yeah.
So I don't know where Ursula got the idea that like, hey bud, like let's get you out of the Playboy Mansion and write me
Right.
some, cash winning, award winning children's poetry, but she knew what she was doing. So go, Ursula.
Yeah, it's I think like you said that people want to there were people saying like, "Oh, he wrote for Playboy," and sort of pearl clutching. But I think like it makes sense, and it makes sense that he did work on the film Postcards from the Edge, which is Mike Nichols, which is all about Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds.
Yeah.
And I blanked on Debbie Reynolds' name for a moment. My mom's gonna be so mad at me. Do you have a favorite poem in the collection or a favorite illustration?
I have a few, but I think it would be different asking me as a child
Yeah.
versus now. I think as a child, like anything with sort of wordplay or silliness
Mhm.
is what I would respond to. But I think the one that really stood out to me, well, there's maybe two. The Land of Happy. It's towards the end. It
Is
says,
there an illustration with it?
it's a balding smiley face man with kind of sad pinpoint eyes. And it says, have you been to the land of the happy where everyone's happy all day, where they joke and they sing of the happiest things and everything's jolly and gay? There's no one unhappy and happy. There's laughter and smiles galore. I have been to that land of happy. What a bore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, as an adult, that hits. And then one of the last ones, The Search. I went to find the pot of gold that's waiting where the rainbow ends. I searched and searched and searched and searched and searched and searched, and then there it was, deep in the grass, under an old and twisty bough. It's mine, it's mine, it's mine at last. What do I search for now? Like, imagine like being a parent reading this to your child and you're just like, ugh. They're like, why are you crying? He just has to
Yeah.
find something else to look for.
Were there any that you remembered really clearly that coming back you're like, "Oh, this one stuck with me," or that when you saw that this was a title that you could do that you were like remembered really clearly?
You know the girl with the pancakes? it was just a perspective thing. And he does that a lot too, about, yeah, just perspective. And it's
Mhm.
I forget what the poem is called, but something about pancakes and she's so small. And I just had this memory of being like envisioning that as a child
Yeah. It's
of
just a
like,
giant stack of pancakes. Yeah.
yeah. So I think like there's details throughout that when I reread them, I was like, oh yeah, but it was just a different perspective that I was given. Like he's got one point of view that's talking about how Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner is great, except if you're the lamb chops, pork, or lobsters.
Right.
And I remember that as a kid being like, huh, thinking about like vegetarianism. Like I
Yeah.
didn't say it was vegetarianism,
Hmm.
but as a child, thinking about the perspective of everything that's sort of a given in my world. So that stuck out to me as well, too. What about you?
I really liked the Melinda May one, the Little Blue Engine. Oh, and then there's one that's called I Won't Hatch, that is a
Yes.
little tiny egg with a little tiny beak sticking out. And it's only one stanza. Oh, I am a chickie who lives in an egg, but I will not hatch, I will not hatch. The hens they all cackle, the roosters all beg, but I will not hatch, I will not hatch. For I hear all the talk of pollution and war as the people all shout and the airplanes roar. So I'm staying in here where it's safe and warm and I will not hatch.
Yeah.
And that really spoke to
That
me.
that hit too for me. I was like, I get it. Stay in there, little chickie. Okay, there was one
Yeah.
called, I think, April Fools that
Hmm.
I was like, oh wow, he was writing about a preposterous world. And then I was like, yo, read this. Okay, it's called Oh, Have You Heard? Oh, have you heard it's time for vaccinations? I think someone put salt in your tea. They're giving us 11-month vacations, and Florida has sunk into the sea. Oh, have you heard the president has measles? The principal has just burned down the school. Your hair is full of ants and purple weasels. April Fool. And I'm like, not that far off.
No.
So the wild sort of children's world of impossibility, there's a few lines in there that aren't so crazy anymore.
Yeah. And those are just the jarring ones where you really sort of sit up and say, "Oh, oh no."
What
Yeah.
is your memory of seeing his photo as a child?
Oh, I don't know. I think it was probably like taken aback. Because he's to a little child, I think, and it depends on the child. And I was very frightened easily. So I think I was frightened of him, this bald
I
man with this big beard and his teeth.
He's
Yeah.
kind of got like a swarthy, intense look to him.
Yeah.
I remember his photo as a child, and like this edition, this is the 40th
Hmm.
anniversary edition of Where the Sidewalk Ends. It's a different photo than I remember, but like he's sitting in a wooden chair with a guitar, barefoot, foot to camera, giving like an intense come hither stare. Which
Yes.
I'm like, okay, that's not his fault for looking that way. I'm just like, I don't know who chose the pictures, but it is an interesting choice to use. I also, again, unconfirmed, but I did go look on Reddit about Shel Silverstein and like someone had said there's this Hugh Hefner quote where he's like he basically was one of the like biggest womanizers he's ever
Yeah.
met and like has slept with like hundreds or thousands of women and I'm like okay yeah this photo on the book lines up with that version of
Yeah.
him and like whatever he wants to do who cares but like the marketing team.
Yeah. Yeah. I also read the like hundreds of women quote, and I was like, that wild, but I believe it. I also saw a lot of things of like him being referred to as like Uncle Shell to the kids and the kiddos. I do think I was like, put the book away. I don't want to know. I don't want to see him. I don't want to know. Just not for me. But that photo, it's in my ebook and it's so fascinating because it is so moody. All of my memories of his photos are super high
Yeah,
contrast. And the center point is the dark underside of his foot. And there's
it's
like
like
no light in it.
Tarantino shot this.
Yes. And it's like from below. It's fascinating.
I read a very funny comment on Reddit where this person was like, when I was a kid, one of my teachers put him in Black History Month, and someone was like, yo, he is not black.
I definitely thought he was. I
Yeah,
definitely
he's
thought he
of
was.
Jewish descent, but that was really funny. And the kid was like, taking up a spot for an actual black author here.
Oh man.
But I do think like anyone who's read his books and have looked at the photo is just, I guess, what does a children's author look like?
Mhm.
But it is not this, I imagine.
No. No, I very much imagine, yeah, like grandma. Although he
Question
is in
for
a
you.
rocking chair. Yeah.
Yeah, rocking chair. Is Shel Silverstein hot?
It fully depends on the photo. I think there's something about that one I understand. I think it's a thing of like, I understand, but maybe not for me. I think it's because in the pictures where he's smiling, the teeth really freak me out. I'm very picky
Okay,
about
fair
teeth.
enough. I mean,
Yeah.
based on this one, it is very like LA
Yeah.
dating profile coded. I mean, like if I saw this on a dating app when I was single, this man would be red flags.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I
Do
have two
you think
examples.
that Peter Pan men, like adult creative men who sort of like can't or don't want to fit into the restrictions of marriage or 9 to 5 job, can be drawn to children's literature because they inherently are just activating kind of their own
Ooh,
space in the world?
I think that's very astute. I
Like
think
that could be, I don't know. I'm glad you think so. That is just being said on the fly here, but thinking about it, it's like, oh, maybe he's great at this because he was a giant like man baby, which
yeah,
benefited readers all over the world, thankfully. I'd be curious to know if people or women in his personal
yeah,
life
I
uh,
would too. I would
felt
love
like,
a
yeah.
book that's testimonials from the women he knew.
Also, I read on Reddit that there was like maybe a biopic about him years
Oh.
ago, maybe in development. I'm like wondering where that is or when we're getting that. And someone was like, yeah, Oscar Isaacs needs to play him, which I think would be interesting. Someone said Jake Johnson, and I did not agree with that. I think he's great. I don't think
I think it's the
maybe,
voice. Yeah, I don't think. Although
but
no, Shel Silverstein's voice was different than I expected it. When
yeah,
I there's a video of him and Johnny Cash singing, and it's
yeah,
not as deep and gravelly. I could see that. I don't know
but
what Jake Johnson looks like bald. I think that's pretty critical.
yeah. I want to see the Shel Silverstein biopic.
Yeah, me too. Oh, let's find it.
But like maybe from the perspective of like a Playboy bunny who like
Ooh.
would have seen him come in and out. I don't know. There's something there.
Yeah.
I'll cast you as the as the Playboy bunny.
Oh, thank you. Oh man, that'd be fun.
Also, can this episode be called Is Shel Silverstein Hot?
Yes, comment below.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, I really want to know.
I don't know. Like I just don't agree with the like he is not appropriate for children. I mean,
No.
look, to every parent is their right of what they think is right for their child,
Mhm.
obviously, but like I think this is a classic. Like
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
think? Like
I think every adult is allowed to be adult, right? Like there's no actual seediness. Like there's no interacting with underage people that I know of. There's nothing actually
yeah.
morally bad. He just is maybe I think he refused in his sense to be pigeonholed, and I think maybe that makes us uncomfortable sometimes that you can
Right.
be both.
Yeah, again, it sort of goes back to that puritanical basis
Yeah,
of American culture of like, if you are this, you cannot be that.
exactly.
We don't give people the complexity to have multiple versions of themselves. It doesn't mean they bleed into each other
Yeah.
inappropriately. Sure, sometimes it does. We've all
Mhm.
heard about that. But like anything we've read or known about,
Yeah.
it did not. Like,
Yeah.
although I did see there was a Playboy illustration of his that was a bit disturbing. It was
Mhm.
like basically a man with a really long penis trying to like lasso it around a woman and it like and she ran away or something. Like it was the illustration was very where the sidewalk ends,
Yeah.
but for adults. And I'm like, whoa, I don't know about this. But it's
Yeah.
like that, however, was
Mhm.
published in the context of that magazine.
Yeah.
So
That's
like,
Playboy, you know?
right, context is everything.
100%. Yeah, and it's not like he was trying to put it that we know in a kid's book. That's
Right. Like,
yeah.
remember all those like Disney animations of like the boners and all that weird
That's
stuff going
true.
on. So as far as I know, don't really see that here. I'm sure someone could make the counter
Oh yeah.
argument or look into something in that manner, but nothing overt that I saw.
Oh, 100%. I'm looking at the titular poem, which is interesting because the title poem and the cover illustration are two separate poems. Because the cover
Hmm.
illustration, that poem ends with "the world is flat." And I
Yeah.
don't know how I feel about that, but I
No, he's kind of giving the flat earthers a little more than we need to these days.
yeah, but also I feel like maybe in the 70s there weren't as many flat earthers.
But
It's
also, I was like, oh, he's making fun of them. Like,
yes.
so, but in our world now, I feel like someone might like glom onto that and be like, see?
Yeah. Exactly. But where the sidewalk ends, I think is really beautiful because it's about, I mean, the last two lines, the children, they know the place where the sidewalk ends. And that's the poem with the peppermint wind and the grass grows soft and white and the sun burns crimson bright.
It's beautiful. And
Yeah.
again, like kind of thematically, the space between the magical space of childhood versus the beyond of adults that I think is really beautiful and throughout. There was one also, one that was very like anti-capitalist in a great way. I don't know where that went. It was the one about the biggest fish always gets the most. Yeah, okay. This poem Fish to me was like 4 lines, so great. The little fish eats the tiny fish, the big fish eats the little fish. So only the biggest fish gets fat. Do you know any folks like that? And I wrote capitalism.
Yeah.
Like it's just
It's a good
great,
point.
great.
And
Do you
I
know anyone
yeah.
who has a Shel Silverstein illustration tattoo?
Oh, I don't know. I feel like probably the bulk of Shel Silverstein tattoos probably come from the Giving Tree.
Yes, which has sort of popped up this week on
Mm.
social media.
Oh,
But
really?
yeah, I've seen it multiple people post it. It's the cover page, but it's like the tree who made healthy boundaries. It's sort of like a rewriting of
Yeah.
it for, I guess, the like pop psychology of social media, which, hey, look, I understand, but eh, don't fuck with Giving Tree. I don't know. I feel mixed on that. And yet, maybe it's a metaphor for a mother who gives at her own expense. I don't
Yeah.
know. Not, we're not talking about that book.
I think that book is probably nice and interesting because it's like 10 pages that you can have hours of conversation around.
Yeah.
And I wonder if yeah, if there's an interview with him somewhere about it. 'Cause it's very divisive.
I think also I read in his will and like estate stuff, there is very restricted use of his work or the context in which it's used, etc. So he obviously thought about sort of preserving
Yeah.
his work after he died, which was interesting. I'm also trying to think of like any contemporary artists like him, and I can't really. I mean, not that I'm reading like children's poetry collections all day, but he really is one of a kind.
Mhm. Yeah, his illustrations kind of remind me of, and I can't remember his name, but there's an illustrator who worked with Roald Dahl a lot,
Yes.
and there's that sort of spindly style
Uh-huh. Yeah.
that I really associate with this as well. And I think those were mostly in the 50s, but I'm not sure. I don't
Hmm.
remember.
Yeah.
Do you know anyone with any Shel Silverstein illustration tattoos? I love that question.
No, but like again, if anyone knows of someone who does, I'd be curious to know which one and why.
Yeah, because none of them are necessarily gorgeous.
No, but to be honest, if I got one, there is one next to hat. It says Teddy said it was a hat, so I put it on. Now Dad is saying, "Where the heck's the toilet plunger gone?" And it's just like a little
Oh,
kid
yeah.
looking surprised with a toilet plunger on its head. If I had to get a tattoo, it might be that.
Yeah, that is one of the few illustrations that I really remembered. That one I really like. And I might do the little candle at the beginning with the little holder. I love those
It's so
holders.
classy. Yeah, good choice.
Or there was one at the very beginning that you mentioned where it's a guy smiling and he looks like he's at the end of his rope. I really
Yeah,
appreciated that.
he's just got like 4 hairs standing and like scruff and like yeah, 2 little eyeballs.
There's one called Hug a War that's just two kids hugging each other, and it's just, dots and a smile, but they look really nice.
Yeah,
Very sweet.
this was so enjoyable.
Yeah. Would you consider it required reading?
I think so. Even more so, like as an adult coming back to this, I found it delightful
Yeah.
and intriguing, and there's just really no one like him the way he writes, and I delighted in rereading this. So thank you
Yeah.
for having me on to discuss it.
I also really like it. I think it reminded me of Sideways Stories from Wayside School in that it's teaching kids you can play with form, you can interact with the audience, you can. I think I had sort of a maybe a stuffy image of poetry, and so this is
Hmm.
really playful with it.
Yeah,
It also reminds me, I just, in, ye olden days before radio, families, and it's like in Little Women and stuff, you have one kid who sits and like reads a poem to the family or like reads a novel, and we're all doing it together. And maybe we should all do that more. Maybe someone should just sit in a chair and read Shel Silverstein to you.
absolutely. Oh my God, I went to a friend's house 2 weeks ago and she was telling me about video games she likes, and then she started playing them, and I didn't fucking understand what was going on, but I so enjoyed watching her play this
Yeah.
video game. Like it felt like I was a kid watching my sister play on N64. And she was
Mhm.
like, "Oh my God, I'm sorry. This is so weird. Like you're coming to my house and I'm playing video games." And I was like, honestly, I love this. Did I think in my 30s I'd be going to my friend's house on a Tuesday to watch her play video games? No, but I love this. These are the kinds of hangs that I
Yeah.
want. So I will go watch you play video games, or you can read me Shel Silverstein poems.
I love that. I really, really love that. Man, well, thank you so much. Is there anything that you would like to plug where people can find you? And of course, Irish Blood when it comes out.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Molly Mary McGlynn. That's the easiest way to find me. And if you want to check out my podcast, Hello, My Mom is Dead, I talk about dead moms with some great guests, but just generally about grief and loss with a tone of levity.
Okay, fantastic. I am going to stop the recording.
Perfect.